to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am pumped to have Ryan Noonan on the show. He is officially the betting content manager over at 4for4, but more importantly, he is a football and golf expert. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, bud. Appreciate this as always. Again, love all the content you do. Newsletter is a staple of my process every week. Again, you pick off some good college football stuff. I know we got the college hoops in the work, so absolutely excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for reading the newsletter. I really appreciate that you mentioned that, and are hopefully getting some value out of it, right?
1,000%. There's always good nuggets. I know you know, wisdom of the crowd stuff from other people in the industry. So there's lots of different stuff in there always. So it's never the same too. And I think that that's super valuable. It's not really predictable. There's always going to be something a little bit different in there. So definitely something people need to take advantage of.
Really appreciate those words because I was just about to talk about it, because this podcast is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. This is exactly what Ryan's been talking about. If you're looking for some action on any given weekend, this is the free service for you. 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. I will bring you insights from sharp people like Ryan Noonan. To sign up for free, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting information through data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Ryan, is there a NFL bet that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, props are starting to kind of come out. Spend a lot of my time on prop side of things, mostly on the defensive side. Defensive props are a little bit later in the week to come out. They have a handful of tackles on the board right now. Some sacks. Sacks are a little bit. Sacks have been doing really well for me this year.
Awesome.
A little bit deeper there. More books are posting them too, so there's more outs for people. From a liquidity standpoint, that really helps. But nothing yet on the defensive side. I have a prop that I like quite a bit here, though. I want to tackle Drake May going over 25.5 rushing yards. This is available across the board anywhere. Minus 113 on FanDuel is the best price I can see right now. Pats are really, look, Drake May's shown a pulse. It's been pretty exciting to see. Regardless, the offensive line has been a sieve. They are allowing the highest pressure rate in the league, the 6th highest time to pressure, so teams are getting in there quick. Like actually, the most quick pressures in the league at 81, according to Next Gen Stats, and like an insane 31 unblocked pressures. I don't know how you can let people get home that many times. It's part of why Jacoby Brissett's back on the sideline. But Drake May has a different gear. Not a lot of design runs with Drake May, but he's not afraid to tuck and run when he inevitably has the pocket collapse around him. And we saw he's coming off of like an 8-attempt, 95-yard run game against the Titans last week, and has gone over this in 3 of his 4 starts. Actually, even got there on the minimal snap game that he had against the Jets. He was kind of teasing this number 2. So again, just a lot of explosives in his game too. He's good athlete. He's creating outside of the pocket too, but not afraid to tuck and run. So 25.5 against the Bears team, who it's kind of surprising. They're 10th in pressure rate on the season. Their on-off splits with Montez Sweat are pretty significant, and he looks to be trending to be active for this game. So even though the Bears aren't a team that we think is going to be an elite pressure group, they're better than you think, and going to be good enough against this awful Patriots offensive line to force Drake May to tuck and run a few times. So anything under 30, I think, is playable. So 25.5 on FanDuel, I think it's a great look.
That is awesome. I would also presume that because Chicago is almost a touchdown favorite, that plays into it as well.
Yeah,
you get a game script in the second half. You need to move the ball down. You're going to tuck and run. That makes that more likely.
1,000%. Yeah, obviously we want to create as many dropbacks as possible in a scenario where we're looking for scrambles more than design runs, and that's been the case here so far for Drake May.
And then, can you give us the latest on the New England offensive line situation? I remember they've had issues at left tackle. If I remember correctly, they were down to their 3rd stringer at one point. What's the current state there?
Yeah, it's not good. Still waiting on the injury report, and that's tough as we record on a Thursday morning. But even fully healthy, it has been an absolute disaster for the Patriots on the offensive line. So we still have to wait and see there. But it looks like they're going to have some backups in here. We're probably going to have some Virginia Lowe, who's not been good this season.
Right.
Minimal snaps, but he's going to be in there, I think. I'm pretty sure. Michael Jordan, left guard. Like, there's going to be some problems here on the left side of the offensive line.
Overall, have you been impressed with May both? Well, actually, I guess passing, because we know he's you talked about his competency in running, but throwing the ball as well. What will you make of his performance so far?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I think it's hard not to be. And again, you have to think of what he's been surrounded by. Again, poor, bottom three offensive line. Right? You can get some other teams in the team picture for that discussion. I think you would say the same thing for his pass catching core. You're not a running game that's going to like win and sustain drives. So a lot of it's been on him to create out of structure. Guys that can't separate. So I think it's been pleasantly surprising. And I think it's hard not to be optimistic about Drake May in a small sample here so far, that there could be some long-term potential. Again, one of the younger guys in the class at the position too coming in. So I think the trajectory so far is pretty promising if they can do anything here in the offseason to kind of build around him, protect him, give him something that can, separate or win on the outside. I think the potential is pretty high.
I absolutely agree. I mean, you look at his receiving core, Hunter Henry is tops with 50 targets. Demario Douglas, who was a disaster on my fantasy team earlier this year, 46 targets. Kendrick Bourne, he's been back, but 14 targets? I mean, that's, I think if he had not been hurt at the beginning of the year, you expect him to be the number one. I mean, that's bad.
That's bad. I mean, that says it all, right? Like when you lose Kendrick Bourne, like what happened last year when they lost him, it was like, oh, that's a devastating loss. Well, you're in trouble, man. If losing Kendrick Bourne is a devastating loss, you're like dying to see when he comes back from the IR. It's not a great place to be. So a lot of Kayshon Boutte. We had the KJ Osborne role for a little bit. It's not pretty. So yeah, I mean, he's definitely working uphill, but it's been encouraging to see his ability to process. And again, I think if you can kind of make it through and take your lumps here a little bit, I think the game starts to slow down a little bit. And then all of a sudden, that combined with maybe there's a little bit better protection up front, and all of a sudden you have someone that can win and separate on the outside. So year 2 and year 3 probably should be on the uptick for Drake May.
Connor Allen was on the show not too long ago talking about Jalen Polk and his issues. It does not seem like, I don't think he's had a receiving yard since Connor's been on the show. He definitely had an under receiving yard that easily hit, because I think he had zero. I think that was the Jacksonville game, right? So
yeah, he's been going after Polk and Osborne, like just these dudes running wind sprints, running 70% of the routes, but barely getting targeted. That's definitely, those are Connor's favorites for sure. He's getting the appetite. He's a sicko. He bad quarterback unders. These guys with 15 and a half receiving yards, banging unders. He's
Polk had one target.
Weird appetite. Yeah,
had one target last week against Tennessee. I'm sure Connor was on that too.
Yep.
So anyway, interesting stuff. Ryan, would love to know a little bit more about your process. How do you look at the NFL board, sides and totals versus props? How do you go about things every week?
So sides and totals, I do content for us at 4for4 around both look aheads, and I used to write team totals specific. That's really in terms of sides and totals where I do a lot of my work. I don't get heavy into the sides, but when I do, it's often in a look ahead line where I think we might be able to take advantage of. It's almost in a way like I look at look aheads almost as almost like a parlay of handicapping in the sense, right? I'm almost having to look at what I think is going to happen this week. So in this instance, you're looking at look ahead lines for week 11. If my handicap is correct in week 10. And I nail kind of how I think that those games are going to play out, I think you have a better shot at predicting where the line movement can go for the following week, right? Because really, yes, we have these markets, they sit out a little bit longer than they used to, but you're really essentially trying to play off of what you think market perception is going to be, how power ratings can change based off of what happens in the week that we're about to have happen. So knowing that just, NFL sides are really sharp, very difficult to beat over the long term. And I'm not building a model like I know you are and other sharp folks are. Without that, I think I know I'm drawing dead, and I just don't love that. Like, I know some people love to belly up at the blackjack table or sit at a slot machine where they know they're drawing dead and there's entertainment costs to that and they enjoy it. I don't like getting in bed, and I feel like trying to tackle NFL sides the week of, I feel like I'm probably getting in bad more times than not. So I think there's an advantage to try to get some CLV in look ahead markets. Totals, I think partially because I'm really dialed into props and trying to project, looking at player utilization and things like that. I think that's something that's really important on the prop side. I think there's a better reflection of team totals, isolating one side where you don't have to worry about what the other side does, and playing around key numbers. That I think team totals are something that I like more than even full game totals. So, playing around with bad teams that get on the wrong side of 17, or maybe good teams that are on the right side of 23 or 24, in a game that I might think has a little bit of tempo, and maybe the underdog in that scenario can push the pace a little bit, and there could be some volume and stuff like that. So those are kind of what I do on the sides in total side. Like I said, props are mostly where I live. Defensively, I make full on tackle projections for literally anyone that I think is going to take a defensive snap. The markets are tighter and better than they used to be, but I still think that there's an edge. There's unaccounted for situations in terms of player versus team versus matchup things. Teams have skewed to give up more tackles against safeties, depending on their game scripts and how they play. Versus, and then scorekeeper is a big thing too. I think I've talked about that in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not an official. Technically, tackles are not an official stat from the NFL side, which is really weird to say. But there's a lot of subjectivity in terms of what is granted a full tackle versus an assist. And when we're betting them, assists count the same as a full solo tackle. So, I have at this point now 4.5 years of scorekeeper data, and I think at the tails, it makes a lot of sense. There's some predictive nature to spots like Carolina, home games for the Rams, Indianapolis. Those home games consistently year over year give out assists at a 8 to 10% higher clip than your league average game. On the other side, games, for the Chargers, home games, right? So that's the same building as the Rams. They definitely have a different scorekeeper because they are polar opposites in how assists are granted out. So there's some sticky stuff with like Minnesota with the road team over the last 4 years, where it's like the Vikings are pretty flat to the average, but they're pretty lazy with like, we're just going to pick one of the guys on the other team and he gets a solo tackle, and we don't give out many assists. So like I think in the tails there tends to be some actionable data that I don't think books are tying into their projection. So there definitely is some exploitable edge there. I break out solos and assists as well to try to see if there's different situations where, like, cornerbacks, for instance, because of the nature of where they make their tackles on the perimeter, a lot of those are unassisted. So I sometimes will like a cornerback matchup, but I'll go at his solo number instead of his combined number because he's really not going to get a lot of assists. So that is I still think a bettable edge along with sacks this year. Just looking at pressure rates, quick pressures, some of the new stuff that we have from Next Gen Stats is fantastic. Offensive line injuries, trying to attack quarterbacks that take a lot of pressures. Their pressure to sack rate is high. All those different things. So I think there's again, it's go where choose your own path here a little bit, because obviously everyone that is betting props is mostly on the offensive side, and I think there's some advantages to being on the defensive side where maybe it's getting a little bit less attention and action early in the week.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you more about sack props. This is actually something that I wanted to look into this season. I ended up not doing it because I just didn't find enough markets at enough books, and I hate it when there's just one-way markets, which, I mean, it's just helpful to be able to bet both ways. Tell me a little bit more about that, how that market has changed and why you've decided to get into it this season.
Yeah, so not enough places, to your point, offer no, which is a bummer. DraftKings and FanDuel are unique in the sense that they offer, DraftKings puts it as a quarter sack. So there's that subject nature of if it's a half sack, right? You could take over under on the quarter sack. The way that FanDuel has it, and we've looked into the verbiage there. There's basically is like to get a sack, and a half a sack is yes from them. So it's basically lined at a quarter of a sack, which is massive. So not having the ability to take the under is a bummer. Like I said, I wish there were more opportunities to do so. But some of the other books, Caesars will, it's basically 1+, or most other books are a half sack plus. So you get the push on the half sack. So because most people, and what we have to do on the subscriber side, we're pushing out bets to a subscriber audience, we want to make sure they have the ability to get down, even though it's only the 2 books on a Friday night, Saturday, even Sunday morning before kick. Almost everyone has access to DraftKings and FanDuel. There might be some liquidity issues. FanDuel's pretty good for most of that. So if there's a good line on FanDuel, someone also has the ability to get down on the DraftKings, I'm okay putting that out to subscribers. I tried to model it a little bit, and it gets really hard. I think it ends up just having to be more matchup based. So you just have to dig in a little bit to, looking at actual, pass rush win rates. Same thing, like, who's allowing the most pressures? Are there, again, like I said, pressure to sack rate on the quarterback side? They're quarterbacks that year over year take more sacks when they feel pressure. So I think those ends up being a little bit more sticky than just raw sack numbers. So had some success this season and want to continue to kind of look at that here moving forward in kind of a more aggressive way. I think sacks in the futures market, like season-long props, I think sacks are pretty interesting because they are harder to kind of pin down, right? It's not necessarily like a touchdown prop where I think that there's just a lot of lottery involved in, right? Like, picking touchdown props. I think there's something more predictive to matchup specific stuff that allows you to actually, make smart decisions and thoughtful decisions on sacks. But from a big picture standpoint, I think there's some stuff that is, from a season-long perspective, advantageous in getting in on the sack side. Again, you have a two-way market there. I think I got down on like 12, and I think I'm like 7 unders and 5 overs, and we're already cashed a few of the overs, so it's been really good. Just looking at, again, there's guys that get a lot of pressure that they maybe just didn't get. They underperform their expected sack metric based off of how often they were in the backfield. So I think there's something there that I want to lean on even more, depending on if the books post a lot. I think they ended up having a decent menu this preseason, which is exciting. So I think that's going to be something that I get a little bit more aggressive in next season too.
Yeah, that would be great. I've definitely looked at some of the stuff that Seth Waller does with his modeling, and I agree with you. I think there's potentially a lot of value there. Right, I'm really interested in this Detroit at Houston game on Sunday night. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of Detroit, but Houston's been interesting. CJ Stroud and that offense had such a good year last year. The numbers are really down. Obviously, part of that is Nico Collins not being there, and then Stephon Diggs as well. What do you make of the Texans' offense?
Yeah, for this handicap, I mean, the Nico piece is obviously pretty important in terms of where we're at here. But Texans, there is obviously a ton of talent on the roster, and I think broadly speaking, it's a well-coached team. The offense is still really maddening at times. They remain one of the most frustrating teams from like a play sequencing standpoint. There's so much reliance on CJ Stroud to win long down and distance situations. And he can, right? He's incredible and he continues to do it. He did it last year. It's been a little bit better this season, partially because I think Joe Mixon has been so good and shown an explosive level that we hadn't seen the last couple of years in Cincinnati. But when you look at in breaking it down, this is just what they did all year last year. Bobby Slowick was like, it was run, pass. And they're still doing it. They're on first and second down. They have a negative 5% pass rate over expectation. It's like, I don't know, a bottom in terms of like run heavy. They're like the 6th, 7th most run heavy team on first and second down. So we know more times than not, you're running into a base look, or at least the opportunity of a base look compared to what we see on other downs. And then you look at third down, they're extremely predictable in the sense that they have a 6.6% pass rate over expectation on third down. That's the second heaviest or highest in the league that they're passing. So we basically have a 12-point delta in pass rate depending on first, second, and third down. And you look in the season, just the raw numbers, they have 7 rushing attempts on third down all season long. Now, that's half of the next closest team. And that tells me a couple of things, right? Not only are they predictable in terms of what they're doing on third down, but because they're so inefficient on first and second down, they're just not giving themselves a whole lot of like third and short, where you're like, hey, this is 3rd and 2. Mixon's got it kind of cooking right now. Let's get him the ball. Like 7 rushing attempts. This is week 10 on third down all season long. It's kind of wild. So, and again, at a certain point, does the slipper fall off a little bit on CJ Stroud? I mean, it gets a little harder, obviously, without Nico Collins, without Steph Diggs. And he's fantastic and he continues to find ways to win. But in terms of me trying to project this team moving forward in the AFC playoff picture, I want to like them. I want to buy into the young quarterback. Again, I think D'Amico Ryans is a good coach. I think he gets more out of the defense than there is talent-wise. They have obviously a great edge duo, but these things are problematic against really good football teams, and that gets harder. So the Lions, I think, are a really good football team. They also have done a really poor job protecting him along the interior of the offensive line. Has been an issue. They are allowing a ton of pressure. Stroud's taking sacks at a really high rate, pressure to sack rate. Last year, 17%. It's up over 22%. Most of that's coming off of the guard positions and center. And that's kind of where the Lions are winning right now. Like Aleem McNeil has been awesome. Obviously, they've changed things up. They're blitzing a whole lot more now that they lost Aiden Hutchinson. So, yeah, I mean, outside of 3 is kind of tough considering I think both these teams are pretty good. But, I mean, man, the Lions are a buzzsaw right now, right? I mean, I just don't know how you stop them from scoring upwards of 28 to 30 points. So, I'm worried about that with the Texans moving forward.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think you stop Detroit from scoring that much by letting regression kick in. I think the offense is good, but they just can't keep that up.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to have a ton of faith in Houston right now just because of that offense. Let's move on to the Monday night game. We have Miami playing the Los Angeles Rams, and I think these two teams are interesting because there's a lot of different moving pieces. Miami gets Tua Tagovailoa back. The Rams got their top 2 receivers back a couple of weeks ago. What do you see in this game?
You want to see the injury report for the Dolphins because it looks like they have a few key members in the secondary that are questionable. If that checks out, I kind of like Miami getting the points. I mean, we've obviously had some Miami movement here. This is 2.5 early in the week. In the look aheads, now we're kind of down to 1. If you get back up to like a 1.5 or 2, Miami as like a teaser leg is probably pretty interesting, even though our total's a little higher than we would like there. But every season-long metric is skewed for Miami. I'm interested to see, I'd love to know what you do adjustment-wise, because obviously this is a very different team with Snoop Huntley and Skylar Thompson at quarterback versus, Tua. I think this is a bad matchup for the Rams. They've been surprisingly one of the best pressure groups in the league. And I think really just in terms of positional groups across the league, you'd have to think that the Rams defensive front has been one of the biggest surprises. But Tua gets the ball out so quickly, and I think that really mitigates the edge that the Rams have in this matchup. Secondary, I think, is poor and exploitable. And then on the other side, there's some pretty drastic on-off splits protection-wise with Rob Haverstein off the field. He's going to be out here with an ankle injury. Still don't know if Joe Noteboom is going to be available for the Rams either. And we've seen what happens with this Rams offense, even with some healthy offensive weapons, if they cannot keep Matthew Stafford clean. And I don't know, Chop Robinson's been pretty surprised. He looked really good, had some really nice snaps last week against the Bills. Got home against Josh Allen, who doesn't take sacks, beating Deion Dawkins off the edge, who's, again, one of the best offensive tackles in the league. So, Calais Campbell dialing back the clock like it's 2008 here. He's making plays. If they can get Zach Seiler back, they get some of the injury guys back in the secondary, I think it's a decent spot for the Dolphins.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a tough one to know. Just like I think the numbers have kind of underestimated this Miami offense with Tua, at least in my numbers. And with the Rams getting their guys back, how does that offensive line hold up? Do they give Matthew Stafford enough time to get the ball out? And I don't know. McVay is going to be pretty good at adjusting for that, though, right? I mean, he's had to have multiple different game plans over the course of the season with differing personnel, even as the game goes on and guys go down, right?
Yeah. No, he's obviously one of the best in the business for sure. So yeah, I just think it's there's got to be something that's playing into this Miami line here that's based off of some other stuff that's non-Tua stuff, and I don't know. I think that there's some questions there. Now, defensively, if their injury reporters have come out clean, probably just to stay away from me. But because I think the Rams could probably cook him and hang some points, and we're maybe light on the total then, even still at 50, which is high, but maybe that's kind of the edge here if the Dolphins injury report is poor.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't really like the Miami defense. So, Ryan, let's end with this. Can you give us a surprising NFL prediction for the rest of the season?
Surprise is interesting.
Or
Look,
just
the
a
Steelers.
good one, a good prediction. It doesn't have to be
Steelers are
surprising.
6-2. Are we sure they're good, Ed? Are the Steelers good?
I'm not completely sure.
I'm not completely sure either. Now, the issue here is that the back end of the AFC is pretty wide open. The Steelers are, like I said, 6-2, so they do have a pretty big leg up. When you look at who they've played in comparison to who they have coming on the schedule, really, I think pretty clearly the best teams they played this year are the Jets. In that weird week 1 game in Atlanta where Cousins didn't look right. It was all just,
Right.
wasn't on the center. It was just kind of bizarre, but like clearly the best teams they played. Upcoming schedule is tough. They have not played any AFC North teams yet, which means they get to play Cleveland twice, but they haven't played Baltimore, Cincinnati at all. Their other games, including this week on the road in Washington, is a tough spot. They also have games against the Eagles and the Chiefs. To miss the playoffs is 3-1. That
Interesting.
is interesting to me. And again, they're already at 6 wins, but I mean, part of it is what happens here with Cincinnati. Can Cincinnati get healthy? Do they have a pulse? Because those 2 games I think matter a lot. Because otherwise, like I think the only spots that's the Steelers are favored here in their remaining schedule are those games against the Browns. And I think those games not necessarily a toss up, but I don't think Cleveland can't beat Pittsburgh, right? So that is, I think, interesting to me at the price. Also, FanDuel has under 9.5 wins at plus 124. That to me, I think, is a great look because you win 9 games and still make the playoffs. So our to miss the playoffs bet is dead at 3-1 with 9 wins. But are they getting to 10? That means they have 4 wins left on their schedule. And part of it for me is I really like the Commanders here this week, especially under 3. It's moved to 2.5 in some spots. I like the Commanders here. So again, you're telling me that there are 4 more wins on this Steelers schedule, and I don't think that there are. I think Russ has outperformed our expectations, or at least my expectations, but I still don't think that he's a good quarterback. It's been a lot of deep contested catches. I don't believe in the offensive line continuing to sustain running lanes for these running backs. So, and I think the secondary is not as good as people think. And again, they have great duo at edge, and that helps kind of mitigate some of that in the back end. But again, it's better caliber teams that gets a little bit harder. So, I mean, I like the Steelers under 9.5 wins at plus 124, and if you like a sprinkle at 3-1 to miss the playoffs, I think the Steelers are a borderline playoff team, still even at 6-2. And think about what Russ has struggled with. Took a ton of sacks the last couple of years, and Cleveland is the layup on the schedule, but Cleveland still is going to be able to generate pressure.
Right.
Cincinnati doesn't do it with a lot of guys, but Trey Hendrickson generates pressure.
Yep.
Philadelphia, Kansas City, Baltimore does a great job at these are teams that are going to be in the backfield. Even the Commanders this week, I think that's part of it. Is they've been able to win. Dante Fowler's dialed it up. In finally paying off his draft capital. Dorrance Armstrong's been excellent. So I think they're just going to have a hard time protecting Russ, and I think that's part of it here down the stretch.
Ryan Noonan, thank you so much for joining me on the Football Analytics Show today. Please let everyone know where they can find all your good work.
4for4.com. If you on the football side, golf season coming up too. BetSperts Golf. If you like to model, I will straight up. We have the best modeling system out there. If you want to use stats adjusted for situation and continue to add different things there. If you like handicapping golf, BetSperts Golf is the place to be. So golf's coming. It's awesome. It's November, so regular season starts here late December with the Century, so it's coming up.
Ryan, so 4for4, you guys have a paid service, right? Where you can get all your best prop bets.
Yeah, so our betting subscription gets you access to everything that we do. So if you still play like season-long fantasy, or if you're playing like daily fantasy or anything like that, all that is part of the betting subscription. And then you also get access to all of our staff and all of the bets that we play. We're talking about Connor and all of his unders. We have a team, guys doing sides and totals, other props as well. NBA team is off to a great start too. So all those are released through our Discord. But yeah, 4for4 and massively discounted at this point of the year too, because obviously we're in November. So yeah, 4for4.com/plans. Thanks, Ed. And then
the golf projections, is that free or paid service over at BetSperts?
No, paid service as well at BetSperts Golf. Yeah. So there's we do have projections. Those get fed into our DFS optimizer, but we have the Rabbit Hole, which is a fully custom, it's officially licensed PGA Tour data that you can put any sort of filter customization, things that you cannot find anywhere else. You want to see how, guys play on driver heavy courses with a low missed fairway penalty. You're going to be able to find any of that anywhere else. And you can look at the last 5 years of data for guys in those scenarios. Any type of split that you can possibly imagine, we have in the rabbit hole there, which is, aptly named, because once you kind of start, it's hard not to continue to dig down and to find some really, really cool ways to break down golf data.
Ryan, thanks so much.
Thanks, Ed.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can get my free sports betting newsletter. As 5 Nugget Saturdays, my curated list of tips and analytics. I bring you insights from sharp people like Ryan Noonan. Check that out at thepowerrank.com. Once again, my name is Ed Fang. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you again next week.